Adam Caplan from the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com, which you can get on all podcasting platforms, and check out their YouTube channel. Just search Inside Birds. It's been a busy week for the Eagles. We'll wrap it all up with today's edition of Football at 4. Adam Caplan, welcome back. And obviously, since we last spoke, the Eagles made it official. They have hired Kevin Patullo as the new play caller here. He will be the offensive coordinator. He replaces Kellen Moore as the play caller and it's pretty much the play designer. I'm sure Nick will have some input on that. My thought here, and I want to get your take on it as we start things off on this Friday, is Patullo was the pass game coordinator. So do the Eagles go back to more passing in 2025?
It's funny, and the reason why I want to talk about this today is we actually did not talk about that, this part of it. We've been talking about Kevin Patullo for 6 weeks. We've really not talked about the difference between Patullo and Moore, and as you just outlined it, I actually want to talk about this because it's what we're going to see this season, so we might as well start discussing it on your show. So what a pass game coordinator does, it's not his scheme, but he helps put together the passing game concepts each week. He talks to the coordinator, he talks to the quarterback, and they go through what they like, what they don't like. They have all the information they got from their pro advanced people of what the defense presents. They have the data from the analytics department, and they go from there. So Patullo now goes from that to now as the play caller and designer. So it's different. It's just much different. Now, the big part, the play designs are all done during the week. In fact, they really start in OTAs, and they go through them big time in training camp, and they've got their playbook, so they know what they like, and they call it. They design plays. They go over plays during the week based on their opponent. Okay, so Patullo now will have to do that, and they've got Parks Frazier, who comes over from the Dolphins and then the Colts before that, a up-and-coming coach who we've got to know about through other coaches who've worked with him. Really sharp guy. Was probably, Mike, he was too young. He was 30 years old when he was the interim offensive coordinator for Jeff Saturday. He was actually 31. Well, he just wasn't ready for it, but he's a smart guy. He'll obviously assist Patullo. The two know each other. They work together with the Colts. With Sirianni, Nick knows Parks. That's why he hired him. One of the reasons why he hired him. But so comparably now to Kellen Moore is a really managed to play caller, big with motion, right? Shifts, motions. Patullo, like the offense 2 years ago when Kevin was a part of it, where Brian Johnson called it, we didn't see a lot of that. So that's a difference. Now, what we're told is what we've been putting out there for 6 weeks is that we expect them to keep the Moore scheme. Patullo Mike will have his own version of it. He'll take what they think is great, and they'll take out what Jalen doesn't like. He'll have input, and they'll go from there. So there's going to be some differences. But you asked the question, to move this along here, about SaquonBarkley and how much they're going to run. The offense absolutely will start with Barkley. That will not change. And Hurts, don't forget, Jalen is a big part of the run game. That is certainly going to be in it. We had that answer as we saw it in training camp. We started seeing it a lot in training camp. And then in the regular season, they became a dominant run team. That's not going to change. Now, situationally, when they call it, how Kevin Patullo, who's never called plays before, that we don't know. Like, let's say their tendency on 3rd and 4 was to have certain kind of passing plays. We don't know what Patullo is going to call, Mike, because he's never done it before. We just don't have that answer yet.
Yeah, and I know, there's been a lot of discussion. I want to get your take on this. We've talked a little bit about it, but now that they decide to stay in-house, they had the chance to get a veteran play caller in here. They decided to do this. They've done this before, and that did not work out well. They promoted Brian Johnson. Do we think that this is set up better than that was?
I do. I believe strongly they learned a lot. The problem from 2 years ago, Mike, was, and this was on Sirianni specifically, Brian Johnson was a play caller, but it was Nick's scheme. They did not adjust to the way that the opponent took away deep throws. Like, teams were saying, we're going to play 2 deep safeties. We're going to make you throw the ball shorter. And while people blamed Hurts, and I understand that, I start with Sirianni with that. That's his fault. It's his scheme. he didn't do a very good job. The offense collapsed as the defense did, Mike, as we all know. And you had an offense that, as Nick called it, stale. And that's why we do not believe they're going to go back to that offense. There are certain things that, by the way, that they kept that Jalen liked last year, but it was a different offense. There's no question about it with Kellen Moore. I'm fascinated to see we don't see the beauty of this is it's kind of cool. We've heard a lot of good things behind the scenes about Kevin Patullo, but we just don't know how he'll call this offense this season. So it's kind of fascinating.
Well, I add it because we always just assume it's like, well, he worked for this guy or he worked with those guys, and we just assume that they're wired the same. No, you work with some guys who think something. He might say, man, if I had this offense, I know I can get the ball to A.J. Brown a little bit more than we did this year.
I don't see... Honestly,
I'm not suggesting that he's thinking that they don't think that they did, but we have no idea. He could be saying, I have Brown and Smith. I'm a pass game coordinator. I think I can get them the ball more.
All right, I'm going to say something off that point because I actually have mentioned this before. Now, Kellen Moore and JalenHurts worked beautifully together late in the season. Boy, it really starting that Pittsburgh game, I think week 15. More often than not, it really seemed like they finally got on the same page consistently. It was really sporadic. Like the first Green Bay game in Brazil was terrific. Then it started to regress against Atlanta. Very inconsistent. We know Jalen had problems holding the ball too long and all that. We've outlined this numerous times. But fast forwarding to week 15, it was a beautiful thing. Jalen's best game by far in the last 2 years, even including the Super Bowl. Jalen was very good, but that Pittsburgh game, he was phenomenal. It's just a shame that Kellen had to move on, and Jalen has another play caller. But with Patullo, let's not forget, Mike, they've worked together 5 years. The two know each other very well. And he was a part of also, Kevin was also part of the 22. And we're told he was actually pretty involved in 22. So he's learned a lot, what worked and didn't work with Kellen. Kellen by heart is a passing game guy, not a run game guy. But when you see 26, Barkley get off to a start like that, and it's working. And then when the quarterback's struggling a little bit, stay with what works. That's good coaching. But to pick up late in the season where they were going, there's really no reason why, if you're this staff, right, this revamped offensive staff, particularly with Kevin Patullo, there's really no reason why they can't go forward and, as you suggested, you know what, throw a little bit more. Yes, it's going to start with Barkley. No one's suggesting it shouldn't. But maybe you pass it 2 or 3 more times. Maybe you're a little bit more aggressive. Nobody ran the ball more in the first half of games than the Eagles, which, by the way, the Eagles were never a first-half run team of games. They were always pass because analytically you should come out passing more than running it because teams that do that have a better chance of winning. But this is an anomaly. I'm not saying they can't do it, Mike, but things are going to change a little bit. Not a lot, though. I think on your question, it's a good one. I expect them to pass it a little bit more, but not a lot.
Okay, yeah. So before we get to a couple thoughts on the Combine next week, because the draft is going to be coming up on the horizon, I guess one question, if he's the passing game coordinator, has a background as a wide receivers coach as well, where does that leave the RPO for JalenHurts?
Oh, that'll be in there. I mean, that's been in here sometimes sporadically, but it'll be in there. A lot of the same concepts are going to be in there. That's the thing. They've run them consistently. Usually consistently, but every once in a while they got away from it. But it'll still be in it. Again, Mike, we'll get to OTAs and we'll see. They'll have a couple practices before, although they're very light before the draft, and really in May, where they open it up. So we look forward to seeing that. But again, Mike, every play caller has a different view of the scheme that they're running. They're never the same. It's a friend of mine who coached with Vic Fangio told me we never see it the way Vic does totally. We just don't. Doesn't mean that, and obviously Vic just won a Super Bowl. He's great. But he's also the originator of the Fangio scheme. But you never quite run it like the other guy did. And again, remember, Kellen Moore brought in a completely different scheme here than the Eagles have been running.
All right, Adam, I just mentioned the NFL Combine starts next week. Give us some early thoughts on the benefit of this and some of the pluses and minuses of the Combine. I heard Mel Kiper say last week, no quarterback should ever throw at the Combine again. So you're already seeing the view of this thing change.
Right, but if you're a guy, okay, let's say you're a guy like Jackson Dart, the quarterback from Mississippi, right? who's definitely going to be a top 40 pick, he's got a chance to go in the first round, you absolutely should throw here. And I'll be there. For football at 4 on Tuesday and Friday, I'll be there. Actually, I get there Monday. You got to, look, you should throw there. If you need to throw now, if you're Cam Ward, do you need to throw there? No. He has a very good chance to be the first overall pick. You don't need to do that. But overall, it depends on the player. Now, what's very important, Mike, is there are two things. Medicals are extremely important. Every team shares medical information. They're all going to get it. They're all going to know. And unfortunately, and this happens every couple of years, a career could be ended by something that is found by the medical testing. Unfortunately, it's happened.
Yeah.
Rarely happens, but it does happen. But you get measurables. You're going to get heights and real weights, not what the school tells you. The schools overinflate height. There have been quarterbacks who the school listed at 6'3". The guy gets to the combine at 6 feet or 6 feet 1/2 inch. So you're going to get real measurables. And then the other thing, which is important, not quite as important, but it's important, you get to interview these players. Now, you only get 15 minutes of it for the informal interviews.
Right.
But you get to interview these guys, Mike, so that you get in front of them. It is important. But the workouts, Mike, are very overrated. You have to be very careful of not overrating these workouts. They are what they are. Remember now, after this, we've got the pro days, private workouts, and then you've got the top 30 visits. So there's a lot. This is just one small piece of the puzzle. Don't overrate it. Like, I'll give you an example. If you really follow the draft, Chad Jackson was a receiver out of the University of Florida. He ran an unbelievable time. He went from being a 4th-round pick to a 2nd-round pick because of his 40 time. That was a mistake. They didn't judge the football player. They judged the time the Patriots did. You've got to be very careful of these guys who run better than you expect. And by the way, these defensive line, like a defensive tackle that runs like a 4.8 40, that's great. But how the heck does that even apply to playing football? So you have to. Joe Banner told me that. Joe, the former president of the Eagles, Joe Banner, told me that he had specific guidelines for what's real and what's not. And remember, he's analytically based, but he said that a lot of that stuff is overrated for 40 times. He goes, it doesn't really transfer to football playing.
That was a John Ross, right? Wasn't he the guy of the Eagles receiver? Yeah, John Ross was like a 4.2 guy, wasn't he?
Well, he went 10th overall, and that was the 17 draft here. And it's a funny story. I ran into his agent. Now, I remember asking his agent, okay, where do you think he's going to go? He goes, you know what? I think he's got a chance to sneak in late in the first round. When I saw his agent, he couldn't believe it. Even he was surprised. You just don't know, Mike. You just don't know. He was a former Eagle and Chief and Bengal and Giant and some other teams. But the fact of the matter is you got to be careful. It's the tape first and everything else falls into place.
Well, the Combine coming up, we'll get some details on that, and then we'll start to zone in a little bit on, Philadelphia. They could lose a D tackle, they could lose a guard, they could lose an edge rusher, they could lose a linebacker. Good draft for some of those positions. We'll get into that down the road on Football at 4 here with Adam Caplan and the guys from the Inside the Birds podcast. Adam, as always, a pleasure, buddy.
Sounds good, thanks.